a topic I really like to talk about. So let me just click away this message here that I'm being recorded. If there's a problem with my internet connection, please let me know. I can switch to my cell phone because I'm in the actual office, and this is sometimes a bit of a challenge with all the different web technologies. Anyhow, the topic I want to speak about today, and let me just start my timer as well, is interfaces, automation, and the topic of standards, as you have correctly introduced. Andre, just a few words about Kaleidoscope for those of you who don't know what Kaleidoscope does. Basically, we or the claim to fame of our company is taking your content global. So as you can maybe read from that title, we help companies produce, translate, and deliver content and manage certain aspects of it globally. So that always means in a lot of different languages. We're a software company on the one hand side, so we have some products of our own, which are the ones here in the orange box about managing things like terminology, as you said, corporate language terminology, also things like translator query management, quality management in translation, and workflow and automation, which will be the topic of today. We are a technology partner of Trados and Quanos, which is known in the German-speaking world, but not really outside of that. And we deliver everything that we have both as software and also as a managed service through our LSP, as you said. I'm just mentioning the Trados and Schema affiliation here for sake of completeness, and also some of the things I say are a little bit biased based on our experience there. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. Why is this even an issue? Why do we want to automate? As Andre said, more and more people ask for this. But why? Well, to start with, we've all seen that content is becoming smaller or is being produced and managed in modules. This is mainly has to do with the fact that a lot of our customers have introduced content management systems. So they don't write the 400-page manual anymore. They write little fragments and they put these together at some point and in some context to a complete document. Which on the one hand side is good because we can shift from this waterfall to the droplet model, so we don't have to wait until the 400 pages are done. But what it means is that we have many different small projects, and it used to be one project with 400 pages, and now it's maybe 400 projects with 1 page each or even less. So the problem there is the transactional costs are increasing proportionally in relation to the translation cost. And by the way, another problem, but nothing that has to do with workflow automation, is that content is also, or context is getting an issue, because of course, if you only get little pieces, it's difficult for the translator to translate some of that. So that's one part of the issue. The other part is companies are getting agile. Everything is getting digital and agile. So this means companies are even more in a rush than they used to be. I mean, translation already was essentially chronically late. Yeah, by the time you have content done in the source language, it's already late for the translation, essentially. So the new paradigm would really be, we want everything automatic, except when there's a problem. And that's this management by exception, or lights out management, as it's also called sometimes. Took me a little while to understand it the very first time, but it has to do with you switch off the light in a production facility and everything still works because everything is automatic anyhow. Why is this the case? Well, if you look at a traditional project, if you're an LSP, you will know this, and I assume most of you are LSPs. So traditionally, it meant somebody had to export something, send it somewhere else. You needed to import it into your cut tool, send it to the translator, re-import that. Then if you're not from music, this is a repetition sign. So that means sometimes this looped. You needed to send it to somebody to get revised and to get, I don't know, checked again, copywritten, whatever. And eventually you deliver the target back. So there's a lot of manual steps that can theoretically be automated. And of course, the ideal world would be someone, or maybe even something, triggers a project. Everything happens automatically, except if there's a problem, then you need to step in and solve a problem. And the problem could be a technological one or a linguistic one. That's why you need query management, for example, or that's why you need terminology management. And then at the end, you still have to check if everything is okay, the layout is fine, etc., etc. But ideally, we automate all these manual steps. And of course, it's also about money, particularly LSPs. I mean, it's really hard for LSPs to increase rates. currently might actually be a window of opportunity to increase rates. So we've actually successfully done it a little bit. But LSPs have already really been trying hard to, maximize everything they can do. So if I talk to some of the LSPs, it's totally amazing what steps they already thought about automating. So the next step really is to get into this workflow automation where you say, okay, well, we want to reduce project management efforts even more. But the next step would really be to reach inside the customer, not only reduce time that the customer spends, but also reduce our own project management time by automating their systems as well. But the additional advantage, of course, is you get a certain lock-in into the customer. Of course, this is an advantage for LSPs, a disadvantage for the customer, or maybe even both for both. An advantage very often is also a disadvantage. But of course, it is then much harder for the customer to kick out an LSP if they are totally integrated into their system. So there's also this element. It's not only about money, although, of course, keeping a customer is also about money at the end of the day. So these are the reasons why automation has become an issue, because it is one of the last things where we haven't squeezed out the last, 0.5% of potential that we still have to save cost. How is this done? What are the steps when you want to automate something? So on a very, very high level, what you have in automation, the way I see automation is you have some sort of a system somewhere at the customer, maybe. You have some sort of a localization process, and you have then again, hopefully or ideally, the same system on the customer side that you want to push the translation back to, saving the customer time, but also saving ourselves time. And there's a lot of things or a lot of parameters or conditions that need to work in order for this automation to happen. So the source system needs to be able to actually send something into translation. This is called the payload, by the way, by the experts, a very interesting word. It comes from these containers that you put onto ships or trains. So basically the stuff that needs to be translated is called payload. But not only the payload, but also what I call business metadata. So something like a target language, a deadline, other metadata that might be necessary, reference, etc., to actually do the translation. Then there needs to be some way to send it over, API, FTP, email, Dropbox, whatever, but something needs to be there, obviously. And then there is an internal process at the LSP, where very often there's some sort of a workflow system in place. There typically are cut tools in place, translation memory, machine translation, all of that. And very often, or hopefully, there's some sort of a BMS, TMS, whatever you call it. So the system where you create invoices and track the projects and keep your vendor data and all of that. So that's also in the mix, essentially. And of course, ideally, it also goes back automatically. And this is not easy to make these systems talk to each other. That's what Andre alluded to. So one thing that is easy, or one thing that can often happen is that, for example, the source system doesn't even know how to send information over. There's just no way to get the data out of the source system in a translatable way, or they don't understand that the LSPs need certain metadata, like the target language, for example, or the deadline, or things like that. Transferring it over is sometimes difficult from an IT perspective. There are companies that simply don't allow FTP or email, or so how do you get the content from one side to the other? Very often there are proprietary solutions then, but all of these cost money to maintain. Another problem is inside our own processes, the LSP's processes. There are many different solutions that are on the market and that are being used. All of them have their own logic, their own workflows, their own APIs, etc. And then also sending it back sometimes is not so easy, because the system sometimes doesn't even have a mechanism to store foreign languages or target languages. So this is not so easy. And the additional problem is there are many of these systems, and I did try to put a lot of them in here. So apologies for the ones that I missed or used an old logo. But the idea is, for example, if you have one of these tools and you start networking or creating an API with some of these other systems, it could be that you end up with a lot of different point-to-point connections. And then if you do the same for another system, you have a lot more. And then if you do it for yet some more systems, you have a lot more. It took me quite a while to create this image. And of course, the problem there is, you know, LSP A might do this differently than LSP B. So there's unnecessary variation, reinventing the wheel. It's just expensive for everybody to maintain these APIs. And at the end of the day, it ties you in a little bit. So what's an advantage for the LSP? On the other hand, is a disadvantage for the customer or maybe even the supply chain at large. So this can actually be a deal breaker for what we call a global content. So what can we do about this? Well, the first step that you sometimes do in these automation processes is you insert what's called a middleware. Middleware really is an abstraction layer which kind of translates what the source system wants into something that the localization process understands. On a metadata level and on an API level, because of course all of these systems have different APIs, these have different APIs, they call things differently, even the languages are encoded differently. So it's basically a translation software if you want, but a technological one. And the middleware very often also can do things like create projects, send packages around, pre-translate, maybe even manipulate the payload. So go into the file and change stuff, queue up projects, things like that, track them, know where they are, and then automatically deliver them back. So this is one step that you can do. You can insert this middleware to make this connection a little bit easier and more universal. So it also becomes more universal because you have one middleware layer and you don't need hundreds of middleware layers if you have hundreds of source systems and target systems, but you have one middleware that does all these translations essentially. And then the other thing, we call it a gateway. I'm not sure if there's a standard term. I haven't found one yet, but we call it a gateway. So that's basically the how does the information get across? So how do you transmit the business metadata? How do you tell your middleware what tasks you even want to do? I mean, sounds ridiculous, but for example, do you want machine translation or human? Do you want this to be reviewed? Maybe you don't even want translation. Maybe you want, I don't know, terminology extraction or linguistic review or something like that. So you need to be able to communicate these tasks somehow through the gateway. You need to obviously be able to get the payload across. So what actually needs to be translated. And it also implements some technological means of transferring it. And this is about standards. This can actually be standardized. This is my personal conviction, something I've been working for, and an initiative that I'm currently trying to revitalize a little bit is the TAPIC initiative that was launched originally by Gala some, I don't know, 5-6 years ago, something like that. Should have researched that date. And basically, you can find a link here. It's a little bit of an ugly link. You can click it on the PDF that I'll supply of this presentation, of course, or just Google TAPIC. I think it's the first hit. If you want to access that, you actually need to create a Gala user, which doesn't mean you need to become a member. So there's no payment associated with that. But you need to sign the open source agreement that's related to TAPIC. So that's why you need to create this user profile. But then you can log in and find all the literature and everything that exists about TAPIC. What's the idea of TAPIC and what does it even stand for? So the T stands for translation, API stands for API, and then the two C's stand for classes on the one hand side. So basically it wants to give you real programming classes that you can use and easily implement, and a metadata model. So we really want to provide code that people can take and implement into the system, and then they will be TAPIC compliant. And the other C stands for cases. So use cases, best practices, where basically the localization industry, because Gala, of course, represents all players of the localization industry, where basically we all together define what are the things that these customers actually want from us. So it's translation, review, blah, blah, all these things we try to standardize so that people, when they order something from the, let's say, localization universe, they know what we mean with that and they actually order the right thing. Then, of course, the idea is that once all these tools have adopted that, if somebody comes from the outside, let's say a new customer that wants to know, how do I get my stuff translated? They can read the use cases and the best practices on the TAPIC website, and they can implement the API classes that are available. And then ideally, once everybody has implemented this, they can essentially connect to each of these systems. So that's what we mean also with operational freedom, or interoperability, if you want to call it that way. I practiced that word for a while, so I'm proud that I can actually use it. So yeah, topic it's not a standard actually per se. So it's not running through ISO committees that typically take a while, but it's more like a community project where we all get together and define these things. So we define this metadata, these best practices. We want to have this go-to or be this go-to place where you can find information about how do I actually connect to the localization world. And we want to have these implementable classes. Why? Because we want to avoid this Babylonian confusion of APIs and this huge cost that we incur when everybody invents their own APIs. It's also faster because you have a standard system that you can use and implement. And then we can really embed the localization process effectively into corporates. There are 4 tracks. What I'm really talking about is the first one, supply chain automation. So this really is about getting a job through all the people and systems in the supply chain, as I showed on that chart. I'm today not talking about the other 3 levels. And the first track is actually split up into 4 groups. I'm not going to go into too much detail for lack of time, but as I said, you'll get the you'll get the PDF. So basically, it's about the business metadata, the specification of the payload itself, a little bit about XLIF, because XLIF is always a bit of a problem because people don't use it correctly. So there's a whole guidance on how to actually create reasonably translatable XLIF files. And then, of course, the API specification itself. As I said, it's community driven, it's pre-standard, it's open source, it's inclusive. So there's also a lot of organizations that are part of this. So for example, ASTM is part of this, or TAUS, or everybody who kind of has to do. We tried really to include everybody's opinion and build something that harmonizes with things that already exist. Essentially, what topic defined is jobs and tasks. So there's a translation job, I'll show that in a second, that can consist of several task types that can then be grouped together. So you can say, okay, well, for example, I now create something that's called localization, but really I include other tasks inside this thing that I call localization. And you can basically piece these things together as you want into a certain workflow at the end of the day. There's an API definition that already exists. So if you log on to the topic URL that I presented before, you'll actually find the Swagger, and there's a GitHub, etc. For today, what's important for you to remember is that topic defines jobs. Essentially, what we normally call a project is called a job here. And the job can contain several tasks. And each task can contain assets, essentially files. Can be source files to be translated, or XLIF files, or reference files, or glossaries, for example. And then there are deliverables, which essentially are the translated files when they go back. And then there are several workflows of how that can work. So you can have a client that sends a job to a topic host, or the other way around. The host can also poll on the client. And you can also basically pick up a job, for example, from a topic host. So for example, we have a Studio plugin for topic. So if you have a topic compliant system, you can log on to that and pull your job into, for example, Trados Studio. One interesting detail is down here. They can also be chained. So one of the problems of these API integrations are often, what if you have more than one client in an LSP? What if the LSP passes it on to another LSP and another LSP? That happens in our industry. Or maybe even at the customer, there's one system that passes it on to another system. You can actually chain these hosts in the topic specification. That's quite nice. Here's the URL of the Swagger. As I said, it's probably easier to just take it out of the PDF. What workflows have we envisaged? These are some of the notes that we drew on the charts in one of the workshops. And basically the idea is it all goes with post and put. So for example, a customer can post a job to the vendor. The vendor says, yeah, that's great. I'll do this job. Then you pull the files that need to be translated. You put the status back and say, I'm done. And then, for example, the host can log in and pull the deliverables. So everything happens with statuses, and basically you can, for example, push the translation back to the customer, or the customer system receives the info it's done and basically pulls it down. This is the metadata model. So as I said, there's jobs and tasks, and then there are inputs, which were called assets in the other diagram, and then are deliverables with a metadata model, which is not final. We're expanding on that, but this is the initial draft. So what can you do with this? I'm fairly reasonably in time, I hope. So some examples of things that we have implemented. For example, we have implemented an automation at a government for their digital parliament system based on Tappic. So essentially, they have legal stuff in their system, and they basically push new projects, new files, or even withdrawn files, for example. No, we don't need that anymore. They push that via Tappic. And then, for example, our middleware, which is called Content Flow, it creates a project, or it can add a project, or it can notify translators that they have to stop translating this file and then remove that file. They're using group share, so everything happens in group share at this place with the phases that you might know if you know group share. So basically, they have schedule, translate, review, and then complete. And they can also pull back things and say, oops, we need to review this again. So all of these things happen. And of course, we send status information back to the source system, which can then come and pick up the translations as they need them, for example. So this is implemented using the Tappic specification. Another interesting implementation, some of you might know Lockup from a company called Xilio. So Xilio has implemented a Tappic wrapper around their product. And what they can do, okay, I'm starting a little bit earlier actually in this animation, not with Xilio, but with any other Tappic compatible content source. So basically, if you as an LSP, for example, if you have a Tappic host, any customer that supports Tappic can basically push content to your host. In our case, it would be our middleware. And then from there, you generate your translation process into whatever cuts tool you use. As I said, in our world, this is all a little bit RWS influenced. And for example, what Xilio adds is they have a lot of connectors to all kinds of web CMSs, and they have implemented a Tappic wrapper around their solution. So basically, you can log into Lockup using our middleware, but also using a Studio plugin, for example, because it's standard-based. And you can download these jobs, translate them, let them know it's done, and then they pull it back in. So for example, one way to do this is if you have a WordPress site, you could use Xilio that grabs the content from there, puts it on their Tappic host, and then, for example, if you have the Studio plugin, you can log directly into that Tappic host and get your project translated, let Lockup know it's done, and then Lockup would pull it back in. Or, for example, another one, AEM is also supported by Xilio. And then this is an example, for example, where you could chain two Tappic hosts. So Lockup basically is in sync with our middleware, and our middleware in turn automates group share. So these are some of the examples. Not everything we do has necessarily to do with Tappic. So for example, Koti is yet another standard that I would just like to throw out there. It's a German standard, very much limited in specification and in use, actually, to the German-speaking world. But in the German-speaking world, it's quite well known. It is for content management systems. So basically, what Koti level 2, we normally implement level 2. What they say is that there is a watched folder that is monitored by our middleware. And our middleware then says, oh, there's a new job we created. We do something with it in Studio or in group share until it's translated, and then basically we create a Koti level 2 file back and put it into the watched folder that is automatically imported into the content management system. So these are also things you can do, and it's also standard based. I just wanted to focus on Tappic today because we're currently trying to kind of revitalize this a little bit. It fell asleep a bit during the pandemic. What does this look like? I have a few minutes left, I think, so I took a short video. So basically, this is our platform, the platform that Kaleidoscope built. And in here, among the things we have is we have these middleware workflows we can configure. So here, for example, you see one of these watched folder workflows where we can set up what do we want to monitor. So for example, here we have a watched folder or hot folder, as it's also called, that is simply monitored, and we expect either doc files or XML files. And if that kind of file arrives, we can parse it. So we can read, for example, the language combination from it. We can read a description, a deadline, all sorts of other stuff from it. We can do interesting things like repair files, repair file names. Customers have funny ideas and put question mark in file names and stuff like that. So you can't store it. So we can repair all that. We can create custom metadata that sometimes you need, like a cost center, for example. If you want to include the cost center on your invoice, then we can just parse that and read that from the XML file. And very importantly, we can parse languages or map languages. Some of these systems have really weird names for languages, like 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we can say, well, actually, that matches Japanese in our LSP context. And basically, let me fast forward slightly here. We can then trigger a project job, which I'm showing here. No, not yet. I'm showing topic first. So we have a similar configuration for topic, similar to the watched folders. So basically here we have topic as an input. The endpoint is configured somewhere else, not here. But basically here we also say what kind of input are we expecting. In this demo, I just have a general input, so it could be anything really. Topic can send whatever file, basically, that's what we're configuring. All the other stuff that I just showed you. And then we say, okay, and what workflow tasks do you want to trigger if something comes in? And then in my demo, there's a workflow considered that's configured that's called the topic demo. And basically, if I look into here, all of those in the audience who know Studio and the RWS universe will kind of understand this. So there's a template, for example, and then we scan it, we analyze it, of course, with the parameters that you can set up for analysis results in the RWS tools. In this demo, for example, we would publish it on group share. We can say, put it into translation immediately, assign it to certain people, so we can automate all of that. Let me skip forward a little bit. And importantly, what we then do is we monitor the project, and we can see, for example, when the file is done, and then push it back. So at every status change, we can do something with that particular file. And here on the left, you can see there's a lot of stuff you can do. Like we can even run scripts that do pretty much anything. For example, you could manipulate the file, or you could call some external tool that does some preparation steps, or even write a C# script that, I don't know, generates quotes in Excel or whatever. So a lot of flexibility that you have here. Let me go forward a little bit. How does this work when we have a topic? So what we have here to show this is we have a topic client tool, basically. We call it the API tester. So this really is what a system would do if they were to connect and really send a job and a task to our middleware in this case. So basically, first you need to authenticate and connect. Then we identify the different workflows that we could call with IDs. So we know, okay, we want to send it to this and that workflow. And then you give it a name, etc. And you say, okay, create this as a job. And now basically the topic job is created. It gets an ID already. And then we can upload files, as I said, all kinds of files, but normally, particularly, you want to have a source file. You can create that as an input of type source. That also gets an ID. So everything has IDs, of course. And then we can use that input to create a task. In this case, it's hardwired English into German. And then I can say, okay, I'm now done. I have uploaded all the files for this job. Now I want to set this to confirmed. And that is the trigger for our tool. Our tool now knows, okay, everything has been sent for this particular project. So we can now start the workflow. So our middleware would now jump into the workflow and create the project, distribute it, etc. And when it's done, ping the source system to please download the translated file. One last slide, and then I'm done, hopefully almost in time. Some critical success factors when you think about automation. Number one, I think it's important to think about KPIs. If you want to measure the success of your automation, you first need to know what you even wanted to improve. So measure things like, I don't know how many clicks it takes to get the project to the translator, or time from, I don't know, arrival of a project to the translator's desktop until they can start working. Things like that you want to measure so that you know whether you're improving or not. Change management is an issue in automation. Be aware of that. There are a lot of stakeholders who are a little bit afraid of automation. Project managers are among them. They say, oh, but we're going to lose our good relation with our vendors or our clients. So yes, you need to take that into account and really foster and make sure people don't lose their relationship, because at the end of the day, translation is all about trust. So you want to really make sure we have this relationship still. And then very importantly, please prevent your customers from changing the text in the target system. This happens all the time. People get their translation back into, I don't know, AEM, and then they change something there. And guess what? It doesn't go back to the translators. So they receive no feedback, and it doesn't come back to the translation memories, let alone the machine translation engines if you want to train those. So make sure you get this idea out of the head of your customer. It's really important. If they want to fix it, step back, go into the cut process, fix it there, and then republish it. And Tapik also supports these things. And with that, I'm done. And I hope I was on time.